OpenAI has finally released an official prompt engineering guide for getting better results out of ChatGPT, and this official guide is technically for developers when using the API, but I wanted to simplify it and give you practical prompts even if you're not a developer and if you just want to get better results out of ChatGPT. And the whole concept of prompt engineering is to give ChatGPT and other AI models like it the right set of instructions so you get better answers. And this document here is broken up to 6 broad strategies for improving prompts. And within each strategy, there are these practical tactics, including prompts too. But I'll give you better prompts that are more relevant for when using ChatGPT and not just the API when you're building apps. So that's for the developer side. But for everyday people just using ChatGPT, I'll make the prompt and the explanation a little bit more relevant. And even though I've spent over a year now improving my prompting technique, I still found a lot of these useful, so I think you will too. And I wish they just released this with ChatGPT over a year ago. Now, the first broad strategy is write clear instructions. And this sounds simple enough, but a lot of people, they get frustrated with ChatGPT because it just doesn't do what you want out of the first initial prompt or the question that you give it. So this tactic is recommended for giving ChatGPT as much detail and context as possible. And here they use a bunch of different tactics here that I'll go over one at a time for actually getting better results by giving it more information. So the very first tactic under that strategy is include details in your question to get more relevant answers. Pretty straightforward. This is the simplest and it gets more advanced as we go from here. So instead of saying, how do I add numbers to Excel? It's saying give it more context. How do I add a row of dollar amounts in Excel? I want to do this automatically, right? So you get the idea. This is, again, very straightforward, but most people stay on the left side of the column and just use one sentence as the instructions. And this says multiple times in this document, these models cannot read your mind. At least they can't yet. And because of that, we need to give it as much information as possible. And if we just give it one sentence prompt, we're not going to get good answers here. And the second tactic under that broad strategy of giving clear instruction is asking the model to adopt a persona. So this is one of my favorites. I don't think they did a great job here with the example, but it's saying to ask the document to contain at least one joke in every paragraph when responding. And this is designed, if you look at this document, it says system and user because this is designed, again, for developers to train a model inside of this thing called Playground. So I'll just open this for a second. So this takes place inside of the API assistant. This is not where we're going to use it. Again, I'm simplifying this for non-developers. So inside of ChatGPT, you could get the same type of an answer if you prompt it correctly. Now, there's a bunch of different ways you could use these type of prompts. One of my favorites is like this. Imagine yourself as a business consultant or act as a business consultant. Now you're given it a persona. This is with a specific background. And here's one more. Explain to me how a rainbow is formed in a style of a friendly scientist who adds fun scientific facts. And you could train these personas with these prompts in a couple of different ways. So act as, again, one of my favorites, like act as an investment banker. Or you could just give it more specific things to say, like add fun facts or add a joke, like the example they give us. And at the end of the video, I'll also give you more resources and more prompts that you could simply download. But right now, let me just get through some of these really useful tactics. Now, this next one is interesting. Use delimiters to clearly indicate distinct parts of the input. So these delimiters, they give you 3 different examples here. One is this triple quotation mark. The other one is this format where you put article, basically this HTML type format or XML tags, where you put an intro and outro in a bracket. And there's another version of it where you just tell it, insert the title over here. Now, these are not that relevant when it comes to simpler prompts. So when you say summarize this paragraph in one sentence, you don't need to put triple quotation marks or ask it to format a specific way. But when your prompts start to get longer, this lets you really refine your output. So I'll give you a good prompt example here. Plan an event outlining both the mandatory and the optional preferences. And then you could give it this format. So requirement, list the requirements here. And then preferences, list the preferences here. And you could see how you could keep going with this. That way, when you give it more context on what you're looking for here, the format is going to follow whatever format you put over here. And same thing with some of the examples they give you. So summarize the text here in haiku, and you put triple quotation mark and insert the text. Now, this is not going to be any different if this is your entire prompt, but as your prompt get more complex, and maybe you want a summary first, then a haiku, then something else, then these triple quotation marks really help. Now, this next tactic is also very useful. Specify the steps required to complete a task. So sometimes I've seen people just copy and paste an entire page as a prompt, and it doesn't really know what the most important steps are or the order of the steps. So this allows you to tell it, this is step 1. So in the case of this example, it says step 1, the user will provide you a text with triple quotes. So this is using a tactic from earlier that we just talked about. And it's asking you for step 2, then translate that into Spanish. So step 1 is going to summarize, step 2 is going to do a translation. So here's an example. Step 1, analyze the key themes of this movie plot. And then you insert the movie plot in triple quotations like it recommended. And then it says step 2, based on the analysis, recommend a similar movie. And you could see this could be many, many steps, right? But this is really going to craft your prompt in a way where it understands, let me finish step 1, let me finish step 2. It's going to give you the output all at once, but it could, again, work in the background more efficiently than when it doesn't really know what's more important or the step-by-step guide of achieving a specific task. Now, this tactic I like, providing examples. So you could ask it a question and say, this is the exact type of a format I want out of an answer. Here's an example. Now give me the next question in that format too. And again, the example they give us is again designed for the developer on the API side. So if you're a developer, this tells you exactly how to do it. But on the ChatGPT prompting side, here's an example of how you use this tactic. Respond to these questions in a philosophical style similar to this example given. So example, teach me about time, respond. Time is like a river constantly flowing, right? So then the next question, this is where your prompt would go again, teach me about happiness. And then it's gonna know based on this example that you want it to respond this way because now it has an example and a response. So if I ask it about happiness and use that same technique here. So giving it an example of a response that you want when prompting could get you very close of getting the output on the next set of prompts too. Now, this next tactic a lot of people use already, but specify the desired length of the output. So if you don't give it any kind of instructions on what kind of output, sometimes it gives you 2 pages, sometimes it gives you 1 sentence. You really never know. But this way you could tell it, use 50 words or 2 paragraphs or 3 bullet points. And it's telling you right over here that 50 words is the least accurate actually out of these other 2. So if you say 2 paragraphs or 3 bullet points, it knows how to do that more accurately than it knows what 50 words are for some reason. So it is telling you that is an option, but if you want it to be more precise, this paragraph or 3 points are an option that you could use instead. So all those tactics were under the first strategy of clear instructions. The second strategy is providing reference text. So let's go through the tactics of exactly how to use this one. Instruct a model to answer using reference text. Now, this is a great way of using ChatGPT, right? You want to give it a specific resource and the output needs to make references to that resource. That could be an article, it could be something you upload, it could be something you use in the custom GPTs, but it needs to have some reference to some source. It could be a website as well if you're using a version of GPT that has browsing access with Bing. So what do we do exactly for that inside of ChatGPT? Here's a prompt formula here you could use. Using the information in the provided health article, answer the question below. So if you want to take a paragraph or an entire page, you could copy and paste it here. And then it says, then you ask your question, what's the benefit of the Mediterranean diet? Which I'm assuming it would be part of that health article. That's why I would ask something like that. So if you craft your prompt this way, it would only have that to reference, which is the article you insert here. Again, you could use web browsing with this. You could just copy and paste from a specific website or a specific article. And then that's what it's going to make reference to, not its internal knowledge base. So this is a really good use case if you need that source to be from a very specific place. And this is building on top of that. Instruct a model to answer with citations from a reference text. So similar to what we talked about, but you just add a little bit here for the citation. So then when you ask it a question, it will actually give you that as the output. And I'm going to give you some of these prompts here in a bit so you don't have to actually write any of this down. But you basically tell it that you're going to give it a document, this time in triple quotations, and then your task is to provide an answer and cite the passage or where you got that answer. So this one, if it doesn't know, you tell it, say, insufficient information, for example, or I don't know the answer. A lot of times you're using ChatGPT to kind of do more official research. This type of prompting could really help you there. Now, the third big strategy is splitting complex tasks into simpler subtasks. Now, this is very useful because a lot of times, again, when you use a big prompt with multiple different layers, even sometimes when you use that step 1, step 2 kind of format we looked at, sometimes you could hallucinate or just skip something that you gave it in the middle. It does a good job with the beginning and end of a prompt, but sometimes the middle part gets lost in the shuffle. So this time you could break it up into smaller subtasks. Again, as one single prompt, or you could do a multi-sequence prompting, which is when you wait for an answer and then give it another prompt. But let me show you some of the tactics here. Use intent classification to identify the most relevant instructions for user. So this is the example they're giving us if we're building a chatbot. Again, as a developer, this is useful, but for an everyday person, this is also useful. Let me show you what it's telling you to do. So it's saying right here, if someone uses a chatbot that we built on our website and they say, I need to get my internet working again. Now, this chatbot needs to figure out, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, it says break it down into 2 different categories. One is, first, figure out what primary category this falls into. So billing, technical support, account management. So in this case, it would be obviously technical support. But then within technical support, this is where the subtasks comes in. It says, tell what technical support can have in secondary categories: troubleshooting, device compatibility, software update. Okay, then it will just make the judgment, again, using AI, to figure out what does internet not working mean. Well, first, it means technical support. Then secondary means device compatibility or troubleshooting, depending on which way he wants to go with that, right? So you have to figure this out when you're building chatbots, but let's look at it as a simple prompt inside of ChatGPT 2. I use the prompt example as travel booking prompt. So it says, classify this travel related question and outline the steps to assist. So can I change the date of my flight booking? Again, this is relevant for building a chatbot, but if someone asks you that question, you could use ChatGPT to answer it this way. So it says, what's the first step? Well, check if the ticket is changeable, then check if there is any potential fees and inform about that, and then guide them through the date change process. So you can see how this is broken down to multiple different steps. Again, if you're not using a chatbot, this prompt is not that practical when it comes to using ChatGPTs. But when you're building chatbot, for example, Zapier AI has a chatbot builder. If you're using that as just an everyday non-developer, you could use this kind of tactic as well. Now, this is an interesting one. For dialogue applications that require very long conversation, summarize or filter the previous dialogue. ChatGPT doesn't have infinite memory. All these chatbots actually don't have that long of a memory. So at some point, they're going to forget what happened earlier in that conversation. This is basically saying, after a new prompt is given, summarize the previous answer so it knows where it left off every single time. It says this is a workaround for this problem. So that's a way where it summarizes the last thing. So then when it's answering the next thing, it keeps having a memory of a previous conversation. And this one is one of those where it's really more relevant when you're kind of designing chatbots and things like that for the prompting. But it's basically saying provide a brief summary of our previous conversation regarding a technical issue in this case. Summary of the previous chat will go over here, and then the next question will go over here. So this type of formatting would be useful, again, if you're building a chatbot as a non-technical person, or even a developer when building chatbots would use this kind of format. Now, the next tactic is useful. Summarize long documents piecewise and construct a full summary. So it's saying if you want ChatGPT to summarize a whole book, it's just going to not be able to do that, right? The context window or the context length that it keeps referring to, depending on which version of ChatGPT or even inside of the API, which version you're using, maybe GPT-4 Turbo, they have a limit of how much text you could input, right? You can't still do an entire book, for example, in any model. So what it's telling you is ask it for very specific sections one prompt at a time. So it summarizes that specific section depending on the length of the input. So here's how a prompt like that would look. Summarize chapter 1 of the book, and then you will put the book title here. Or again, you could, if you're using GPT-4, you could upload different sections of different text documents to it. You could also build custom GPTs that are covered in a different video as well, all about GPTs. Those are basically mini chat GPTs that have your knowledge base. So in this case, it could be this book title. Highlight the introduction, the main characters, outline any key events, and set the stage for the story. So you could see this is just gonna reference that one chapter, and then you have to build on it. And maybe eventually when you do all the 10 chapters, you could take the summaries and then say summarize now all these together. But this is just telling you, hey, don't try to give ChatGPT more than it could handle. It's just gonna give you an error message. So using this tactic, piecewise tactic, basically helps you get over the length, the context length. Okay, let's get to the next big strategy, which is giving models time to think. So a tactic for that is instruct the model to work out its own solution before rushing to a conclusion. I really like how they laid this out. Basically, they're using an example of a teacher using it here. And basically the teacher says, is this student's solution correct? And then they're pasting a solution to a problem. And ChatGPT in this case will do a incorrect job. It says a student solution is correct, but it turns out it's not correct. So how do you get around that? Well, here, first work out your own solution to the problem. This is the prompt. Then compare your solution to the student solution and evaluate if the student solution is correct or not. Don't decide if the student solution is correct until you have done the problem yourself. This is fantastic, right? It's basically saying, if you don't give it enough context there, and if it doesn't work through any type of problem, it's going to most likely give an incorrect output. Now, this next tactic about giving these ChatGPT models time to think, use inner monologue. Basically, it's saying a lot of times it doesn't make sense for the user to see the thought process in the answer, right? We just want the answer, maybe the thought process doesn't make sense as the output. So it's telling us there is a way where we could actually prompt it in a way where it doesn't do that. It just kind of gives us the answer. And the example they gave us actually is using some of the tactics we've learned so far. So it's using that step-by-step guide. It's using that triple quotation mark, but it says first work out the problem. Don't rely on the student solution since it may be incorrect. Compare the solution and then to the student solution as the second step, and then enclose all your work in this step with a triple quotation mark. If the student made a mistake, determine what hint you need to give the student. And then step 4, if the student made a mistake, provide the hint from a previous step. This whole concept of prompt engineering, a lot of times as you get better, you're using multiple different things from what we've learned so far. So that step-by-step sequence, the triple quotation mark, all of it comes into play. And this one's one of my favorites. I've been using this for a long time. Ask the model if it missed anything in the previous pass. Basically having ChatGPT models check their own work to see if they find anything else they missed in the first go around. And again, this is gonna be a little complicated. This is again designed for developers because it's asking you to output things in JSON format. Great if you're using this API assistant to build apps, but for non-technical people, I have a simpler version of it. Having gone through the scientific paper, in this case it's a scientific paper, identify more quotes than answer what are the key findings of the research, again the title of the scientific paper. Avoid repeating previously listed quotes and provide full context. Okay, so this could be listed, not just quotes, sections or things like that. And this way it will redo its own work. So this is a kind of a follow-up prompt that is really useful. A lot of times it's gonna miss things in the first go, especially if your prompt doesn't have enough context. Okay, this next strategy I'm gonna rush through so we could get to the next one, but this one's designed for developers using external tools. And it's telling you to use things that will help you with better knowledge retrieval. So inside of what's called the API cookbook, there's a whole directory of knowledge bases that are basically embedding these knowledge bases into your API so you could get access to information that otherwise you wouldn't have access to. For everyday people though, what we could do is, with the paid version of GPT, we could build our own GPTs, our little mini GPTs, and our knowledge base could be whatever we give it. So it could be our own documentation. Again, I covered that in the GPT video, but if you do it that way, you're basically doing this, but for non-developers. If you're a developer, these external tools are going to make a lot of sense to you. So you could also do API calls, external APIs. So APIs, again, are a key to someone else's knowledge base, and you could basically use them to communicate between multiple different apps. Inside of GPTs, there is a more advanced version called Actions. You could implement that, again, covered in a different video. And you have things called functions, again, related to APIs. But this next strategy is relevant for everyone. Test changes systematically. So usually I have a task in any given day, right? It could be writing email, it could be creating a blog post, or it could be creating a social media ad, for example. For all of that, I need a perfect prompt that gets me started. And I don't want to start every time coming up with that prompt. I want to save that prompt. So every time I make changes to that prompt, based on everything we've talked about so far with prompt engineering, I want to be able to compare the two prompts, the previous and the new one, and see which one's giving me better output. So systematically means, well, change something you could keep track of so you know exactly what you changed. And was the result better or was it not better? And then go back and do it again. If you just write an entirely new prompt and you're not systematically keeping track of these changes, again, this is made for developers, but everyday people, this basic A/B testing. Is this better or is this better? Let me change something that I know would result in something better. And if it doesn't, I go back and then do it again. And it also says that do multiple tests. Don't just change something about your prompt and go about your way. And again, for developers, it says make sure this is a repeatable test. In the case of just using ChatGPT, just make sure you save that prompt so you don't have to always start from scratch and go through these testing. Just save your result. I have different prompt books for different things I do. So if I'm doing sales copy, I just refer to that and use the same prompts that are really perfected over the course of time, so I don't have to think about it every time. And what I did was I took these 6 strategies, the tactics under each strategy, and I basically created a nice and easy PDF with all the prompts that I included too. So for each one, I simplified the prompts for non-technical developer type people. So that is also available on my website. It's free, you could download it. And I'll also send you other free resources as well. And if you want to learn more about prompt engineering or just ChatGPT and all the top AI tools, we have an entire platform called Skill Leap AI. We have well over 15 AI courses, all complete courses, and you could access them right now. And we release 2 to 3 new courses every single month. So if you want to learn about ChatGPT, prompt engineering, more advanced ChatGPT course, Midjourney, basically all the top AI tools we cover with full courses on this platform. And it's an all-in-one Netflix style subscription, so you don't actually ever have to buy individual courses. All the new ones you just get access to. We have a GPT course coming up, for example, next week. And it also includes a free 3-day trial just to make sure it's a good fit for you. So I'll link that below, again, if you want to learn more about that. Share this with anyone that wants to get more out of ChatGPT. I hope you found it useful. I'll see you next time.